Big breaking news coming in, a big development in the ICICI Bank development matter. The bank has said that they have received a report from Justice B.N. Srikrishna. Remember that this probe panel was set up in May last year to understand and probe the allegations levelled against Chanda Kochhar, that of nepotism, quid pro quo and also conflict of interest charges. The biggest takeaway is that the bank has found Chanda Kochhar guilty of violating the company's code of conduct. Remember that she was being probed for her involvement in allegedly sanctioning loans to Videocon for quid pro quo basis in return of favors for her husband Deepak Kochhar's company. While these allegations first came to the fore in 2016, the bank had consistently maintained that an internal probe conducted by them had found no wrongdoing on the part of Chanda Kochhar. In fact, they gave her the clean chit in March 2018 last year. Let me quickly go across to HP Raina, who joins us on the phone line. Sir, we have with us a communication from ICICI Bank that clearly says that ICICI Bank's former MD and CEO Chanda Kochhar was found guilty of violating the company's code of conduct. The matter pertains to the loan case of Videocon, which was first reported in 2016.
Yes, it obviously means that there was something wrong with the previous management. Either they were not aware of what Chanda Kochhar was doing, or they were aware of it and they tried to cover up. This, I think, is certainly brings out the management, the earlier management, in very poor light. And obviously, the Srikrishna panel report is very clear that there was a breach of the company's bank's code of conduct, and the bank should have acted diligently and immediately to set right the situation, which has not been done.
Brings me to a very important question. Why was ICICI Bank Board in such a hurry to give the clean chit to Chanda Kochhar? Because remember that this allegation first came in 2016 and the bank consistently maintained that they have investigated the matter. There has been an internal audit. They went so far as to back Chanda Kochhar's extension once again as MD CEO of ICICI Bank. What do you think really shows of the strength of the board in this light?
Very poor light. It means that obviously all the directors were just trying to, support Chanda Kochhar for whatever reason, we don't know, which is something which always has to be kept in mind, that when we talk of independent directors, none of them are truly independent in the real sense of the word, and they are beholden to the promoter or to the senior executive who has appointed them. So this brings out the whole issue of corporate governance. And I think all companies will have to now have a quick look at what's happening in their own companies to make sure that this thing doesn't happen again. But obviously it's a complete breakdown of corporate governance norms in ICICI Bank.
Mr. Ranina, good evening. This is Neha Bothra joining in from the New Delhi studio. Yes, it throws the poor management in very poor light. But let's talk law now. If you were to go strictly by law, can they escape the law? What happens next? As per that, we know about the CBI FIR, which has decided to look into the committee of creditors. It has the banking stalwarts, but there's been a lot of drama that has followed after that. The investigative officer has been transferred. You've had Arun Jaitley in New York saying stick to the bullseye, look at the bullseye, don't get into adventurism, don't let ego come in the way. So if I were to look at the law and the previous chairman, for example, that backed Chanda Kochhar, the entire board that backed Chanda Kochhar refused to even set up an inquiry. The Justice Srikrishna committee was set up only thanks to public pressure. What happens next legally?
Well, legally, the stock exchange would be the first, and SEBI should take up the issues, saying that they have violated the guidelines of good corporate governance. So that's under the Companies Act. And as far as SEBI is concerned, they will say that you have not brought out the true facts and you have misled the investors. So I think legally both SEBI and stock exchanges can move against the bank if they wish to do so. As far as the other agencies are concerned, that is more on the economic offences. And if they find that there's been diversion of funds, for example, it would mean that they have cheated the investors. Now, that action would follow under the Indian Penal Code. So those are separate acts of non-compliance with law, which can be executed by their appropriate agencies.
Mr. Rainina, the panel report goes on to say Chanda Kochhar violated internal bank policies and rendered processes and violated the processes and rendered them pretty much useless. Can the CEO actually do that? It seems very difficult to believe that one person alone can, take over the entire processes at one of India's largest banks. Is that even possible?
Well, it shows it is possible that the fact that she did it, she got away with it, and the bank management did not take action against her, but in fact supported her. All this goes to show that this is possible. One strong individual can create problems for a whole institution. It has happened in India, it has happened outside India also. So really the difficulties are always there when there are no proper checks and balances. When, the management is totally beholden to one particular individual, or one particular individual thinks that he or she is above the institution. These things have happened in the past and will happen again unless sufficient measures are taken and proper checks and balances are put in place as part of the corporate governance measures.
Raina, do you think that this will add weight to CBI's FIR in which they have booked Chanda Kochhar for carrying out grave misjustice as far as her role as the banker at ICICI Bank is concerned? More so since you pointed out the need for checks and balances, 8 other prominent bankers have been named in the FIR who were in some way or the other part of the entire committee that sanctioned these loans. Do you think more action should be taken and more examination is required to probe their involvement in the entire matter?
Yes, obviously the CBI has named them, and now it is their duty to do due diligence and to make sure that proper investigation is done and the true facts come to light. Of course, if those persons are innocent, then they would be shown to be innocent, but if they're committed, they are party to the fraud, then they would have to be punished as well. So certainly this Justice Srikrishna's report will add a lot of strength to the CBI's efforts to pursue the matter much more vigorously.
As far as the bank's action against Chanda Kochhar is concerned, they've said that all future entitlements such as any unpaid amounts or unpaid bonuses and any such unpaid amounts that are to be paid to Chanda Kochhar will be held back. There will be a clawback clause as far as the bonuses from April 2009 until March 2018 is concerned. But no further action will be taken. Do you think this is reasonable in terms of the kind of damage ICICI Bank has seen to not just reputation, but even the confidence hit that investors saw during the same period?
From that, whether it's reasonable, we have to go by what the justice has, suggested. It is his decision, and therefore we accept it. But what worries me is that foreign investors, international investors may take class action suit against ICICI Bank management. They will hold the entire board responsible because if they will feel that they have suffered a loss, and they can take action against them. At least in America, it would be done. In India also, now that this has now been accepted in our Companies Act, class action suit can be now filed against the entire bank, and the earlier management can be held accountable.
Mr. Rainina, for you to understand what we're talking about as well as for our viewers, I'm going to actually read out what has been informed to the stock exchanges. The inquiry report concluded that Chanda Kochhar's lack of diligence with respect to annual disclosures as required by the bank in terms of internal policies, the ICICI Bank Code of Conduct and applicable Indian laws, rules and regulations towards avoidance of conflict of interest, when considered that the bank's processes were dependent solely on the directors discharging their fiduciary duty to recuse themselves and avoid conflict implies that the bank's processes were rendered ineffective by her approach to such disclosures and avoidance of conflict. What does this in simple English mean? Does this mean that it's up to the directors only to disclose, or does it mean that maybe they decide to distance themselves a little bit to not cross Chanda Kochhar?
Not only that, but it means that the directors failed in their fiduciary capacity to take appropriate action against Chanda Kochhar at the correct time. That they have therefore been guilty of total negligence, and perhaps in a sense some of them may be held even to have connived with what she has done, if it can be shown that those directors were aware of it and they kept quiet. So a charge of connivance can also be brought against some of the directors who were aware of what Chanda Kochhar was doing.
So is this open-ended? Has this been left open-ended with what I have just read out to you? Because that's the sense I got, but I want you, a legal luminary, to tell me if I'm right or wrong in that. Has it been left open-ended?
Yes, you're right. It is open-ended in that sense. And maybe we'll have to see the entire report, study the entire report, and then also wait for the CBI's findings. And obviously now at least the new management of ICICI Bank should immediately initiate action, probe deeper into the matter, come up with their own findings if they can. And that would somehow salvage the situation to make the investors feel that at least now things are going to be different from what they have been in the past.
We're also being joined by Prabal Basu Roy, the management advisor and former corporate director. Prabal Basu Roy, have you had a chance to see what has been informed to the stock exchanges? Justice Srikrishna, who after a lot of public pressure had been appointed by the ICICI board to carry an independent inquiry, has concluded that there was lack of due diligence. The Chanda Kochhar took over all the processes. I read out a very important paragraph for HP Rainina, and I'm going to do it for you as well. The inquiry report also concluded that Chanda Kochhar's lack of diligence with respect to annual disclosures as required by the bank in the terms of internal policies, code of conduct and applicable Indian laws, rules and regulations on her interest towards avoidance of conflict of interest, when considered that the bank's processes were dependent solely on the directors discharging their fiduciary duty to recuse themselves and avoid conflict, implies that the bank's processes were rendered ineffective by her approach to such disclosures and avoidance of conflict. What do you make of this? HP Rainina believes that this has been left open-ended and it needs to be seen if any of the other directors were allegedly were or were not acting in connivance with Chanda Kochhar. Are you also of that view?
Well, you know, I have not had an opportunity to even know about this subject. I just heard from you just now, actually. So, but I'm not surprised by what you just read out, because I mean, I have written about this few months ago, you know, 6-7 months ago, on this, that it cannot be only because of the failure of Chanda Kochhar. I mean, there are other people who are part of the management team or the committee of directors, etc. You know. This whole process has been rendered ineffective because they all look the other way. That is the primary issue which I had mentioned about ICICI Bank in those articles which I had written, saying that, you know, it's not only one person. Of course, she is responsible, but there are others too who would be equally responsible for looking the other way or just towing the line. And that is the culture of the organization at that level, which needs to be corrected. So I'm fully on board with what you just read, but I have to read it tomorrow, you know, the full report, and then come to a conclusion. But what you just read, absolutely bang on. I think it is a serious indictment on the entire management of ICICI Bank, including Chanda Kochhar.
This point forward, the very fact that Mr. Roy pointed out, it's not Chanda Kochhar alone. There are other people involved who should be investigated as well. Remember that this first came to light in 2016, and since then ICICI Bank board has consistently given the clean chit to Chanda Kochhar without really doing a neutral audit in this entire matter. Now that they are coming out and saying that an independent probe, one that was led by Justice B.N. Srikrishna, has found her guilty with respect to violation of company norms, do you think that there's a bigger plot here that remains to unfold? There are more people involved who need to be investigated?
Investigations are concerned. I think investigations are necessary because, you know, we say that there's a new management in ICICI, right? I mean, really, there is no new management. The CEO is new because he came from a different ICICI organization, but they've all been groomed in the same culture, so to speak, which was the reason for this entire episode to have taken place in the first place. I cannot imagine a company which is well run, which has a solid culture, where the CEO can dictate the committee of, the credit committee or the committee of directors to toe her line. I mean, it's just not possible. So therefore, let's not fool ourselves saying that this is a new management team and all that. That management team, many of the directors, executive directors, even today, are the same ones who worked under Chanda Kochhar. They are still there.
Fair point, so Mr. Roy.
So therefore, investigation has to be done to figure out, they may not be part of the plot, but they're definitely guilty of looking the other way.
I take your point, Mr. Roy, at this juncture, I want to come across to you, Mr. Hazari. I clearly remember the day in March when there was a press conference called and we had the former chairman of ICICI Bank read out the press release that was released the previous evening without any changes. He refused to take any questions, and that really was a blatant sign of how they were defending Chanda Kochhar in light of such grievance that was being raised, such grave concerns that were being raised, but they did not answer a single question. I clearly remember that. And this really brings me to the point, do you think that there's a need for a total management overhaul? Because it was highlighted that there needs to be proper systems put in place, and the management that we now have at ICICI Bank is one that has been groomed at the bank. They are from the same stable. Do you think that this is one area that will perhaps dent the confidence of investors, considering that the leadership team hasn't really changed, barring a rejig here or there?
It is absolutely imperative for the existing executive management to be removed and for an outsider to be got in. And that outsider should then recruit and induct experienced bankers from outside ICICI Bank. Because the CBI FIR, now Justice Srikrishna's report, it thoroughly and completely exposes the credibility of the ICICI Bank board then. And in particular, it exposes the conduct of Mr. M.K. Sharma, the then chairman, who very brazenly defended her. It also unfortunately exposes the conduct of Mr. Vagul, who did his rounds on various TV studios defending Chanda Kochhar, and it now is very clear to analysts like me that there was something obviously going wrong. So this tells you, as the earlier speaker very rightly pointed out, that the culture in this organization is rotten, and therefore the only solution is to have a new culture come in, and that can only be done when an entirely new team from outside is brought in. So either they get a very strong, capable PSU banker in, because normally their ideas on value systems and even a compliance system, in my opinion, are better than these private sector banks, or they get a very competent and person of very high integrity from the private or foreign bank sector who gets in his own field. But we cannot have any credibility now with this existing team when you have such strictures being put.
Hemendra, that's a very important point that you're making, and let's stick with that theme. And Balbir Singh, a senior advocate, you all know him very well. He's often on ET Now, also joining us for his reaction. Balbir Singh, Justice Srikrishna has pretty much put Chanda Kochhar in the dock, has talked of lack of due diligence. If you were to read it, he's also left it open-ended if she acted alone or if it was in connivance with other board members. Having said that, the view I want to get from you, and you as a lawyer, is what happens next? Okay, the bank is seeking a clawback of bonuses and payments and emoluments that have been made to Chanda Kochhar. But from a legal point of view, what happens next? While, she will be prosecuted, What about others? The FIR has, for example, already booked Venugopal Dut and Videocon, but there have already been rumblings that there may be other loans as well. What about those beneficiaries? How do you see this panning out?
Nayantara, I think first of all, it is certainly not looking good for ICICI and the management of ICICI. That is the first thing. So far as the legal position is concerned, the FIR has already been registered, and even if a couple of names are not there or the certain loans are not inquired or investigated, the scope of investigated can be expanded or extended to any extent, since it is only an investigation stage. So therefore, to look towards any other transaction, the CBI and the investigators are free to look into any kind of transaction which ICICI has undertaken with any of the related parties or unrelated parties. Second, even if a couple of names are not there in the existing FIR, anybody can be further named as accused in the FIR. Even at the trial stage or the magistrate stage, it can be done. Now, looking at all this, I would imagine that there is going to be some serious change at the management level. And Justice Srikrishna's report is certainly a very serious affair for ICICI. In case the CBI, which I'm very sure is going to rely on this report during the investigation, as Srikrishna would have given a report after conducting his own inquiry and after examining maybe a couple of people from the management. So I would presume, the scope of inquiry now is going to be further enlarged in terms of not only looking at one particular transaction, which is the colorable transaction, and it may go to multiple transactions. Second, it is not going to stay with the names which are existing in the FIR. It is going to be a further names may come in as accused in the FIR or when the charge sheet is produced. The one aspect which need to be noted is generally what happens is when FIR is filed, FIR quashing can be filed before the High Court. That is the first step where if prima facie nothing significant is found, then High Court without trial can quash that. I can say with certainty after reading what you have read that it is not going to be easy case for any High Court to quash these proceedings, which means that ICICI and Chanda Kochhar plus the other management people, they need to go through full trial. Now, so far as finally they'll be prosecuted or not, that depends on a trial and the evidences and the investigation by the CBI.
Let me come back to Hemendra Hazare. Where do you stand on this? Balbir has given his views, full trial, other transactions. We don't have access to the full report of Justice Srikrishna. He's refusing to talk to the press either. But, it was a long due diligence process. We understand the law firm Luthra & Luthra, which is now called LNL, had also assisted. Hemendra Hazare, what is this going to mean for the banking landscape, the corporate governance, as well as some of the largest accounts that are there with ICICI? I believe Hemendra Hazare is no longer with us. Prabal Basu Roy, if I could get your views on this. Full trial, already murmurs of why isn't the entire management being overhauled? We don't know the number of transactions that have been studied by Justice Srikrishna, assisted by the law firm LNL. We know about Videocon. For example, we read about SR. There have been some rumors about a sugar company. How do you see this panning out?
Well, there are not only rumors. I mean, there have been talk about this right from 2013 about some of the companies you mentioned, including Videocon and SR, right? So all that this entire episode has came to light because of the whistleblowers report, which only talked of Videocon. So now that this has been established by Justice Srikrishna, I mean, a full investigation is very much necessary, because I'm sure it wouldn't have just been one transaction. When you start dipping in the pot, you don't stop at one of them. That is the basic thing, and bankers tell me that the rot is far deeper. So therefore, a full investigation, I support the earlier speaker, a full investigation is necessary, and that will of course determine the will of the government as well to clean up such things. confusing statements from Finance Minister Jaitley, for example, over the weekend, was really confusing to people like us. But I think a full investigation is definitely necessary. And much more will come out because we must use this as an opportunity to clean up the system, if we can. Yeah.
I want to come to you at this point. Mr. Roy very fairly pointed out that the rot is deeper. In fact, he believes that a complete cleanup is required. At this stage, how do you think ICICI Bank should function? Do you think there should be an interim management in place, considering that investors clearly will have a big shock, considering that for 2 long years they have been taken for a ride where the board blatantly supported former MD and CEO Chanda Kochhar? The board is answerable to investors. Do you think that there is a need to clean up the system and have an interim management in place to run affairs at ICICI Bank? That's the second largest private bank in the country. Mr. Hari Bhakti, the question was for you.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. Well, no, I don't think there is any need to have any new board, if that's what you're implying. What is important is that Justice Srikrishna's report should be critically examined and all his recommendations should be implemented by the board. I think you have an excellent management in place at ICICI Bank as we speak today, and they should be made responsible to take the findings to their logical conclusion, whatever that might be. So I don't think there is any case at all for having any destabilization at ICICI Bank by trying to get the entire board changed. I certainly would not be for that.
Mr. Hazari, I want to pose the same question to you to bring in your views. ICICI Bank is the second largest private bank in the country. Investors have put in money in this bank. For 2 long years, they've been taken for the ride because the board blatantly defended former MD CEO Chanda Kochhar, even in face of grave allegations like nepotism, conflict of interest and quid pro quo, without really considering the need for an independent inquiry in the matter. While it has been established that there is a need for a total cleanup, we need to rejig various systems in place at ICICI Bank. Would you consider it important, or would you even recommend the need for examining the board once again and perhaps having a revamp as far as the entire management is concerned? Is there need to put in place an interim management till investigation involving role of various bankers who were part of the committee is completed?
Firstly, please note that the CBI FIR has named Mr. Sandeep Bakshi as well, and they have said that he needs to be investigated. They've named other senior people who are still in the senior management of the ICICI Bank Group, which also includes ICICI Prudential Life. Therefore, in my view, in the light of the CBI FIR, as well as the Justice Srikrishna report, one, all those independent directors who were there at that time when they were trying to shut down any independent investigation and giving a clean chit to Chanda Kochhar, they have to be sacked forthwith. They have absolutely no credibility in the eyes of the market and the eyes of analysts like me. Second, when it comes to the executive management, all those people who have been named in the CBI FR, I think the board must realize that naming also means that it's a pending investigation, and as per RBI's fit and proper criteria, in my opinion, they should step down from the board. Therefore, I am all for a complete change in the ICICI Bank senior executive management. Because as the earlier speaker very rightly said, they've all been groomed under Chanda Kochhar, and therefore we require a new culture in this bank, and that can only take place when you get an outsider. By relying on the existing executive management, you're sure to get a cover-up. It is very high probability that that everything will not be exposed. And therefore, it is imperative for the credibility of ICICI Bank, for the private banking industry in India, that an entirely new management should be brought in at the earliest.
Shailesh Haribhakti, if I could come to you. You talked about stabilization, that you don't see it being stabilized. You've just heard what some of the other speakers have to say. My big question to you is, and you know, I've asked this to everyone, even Neha has been alluding to this. Could Chanda Kochhar have acted alone? Is it only because she didn't disclose, you know, the business her husband was carrying out an advisory committee firm that he had set up with his own brother? You know, could she have acted alone? And have you had a chance to see the press release that has been put out by ICICI Bank on Justice Srikrishna? Because it has left that question of if there was indeed any connivance as open-ended.
Well, as I said earlier, I think we should take this very seriously. The respect that Justice Srikrishna deserves is of the highest order, and I would be for making sure that every aspect that he has alluded to or covered in his report should be fully examined. But I am totally against the recommended course of firing everybody who's been put. The CBI had not said that all these people are guilty. They said that in order to reach the truth, they might have to question them, which is very different from reaching a knee-jerk or a swift conclusion that everybody else is guilty just because their name appears in a list of people that CBI would want to inquire from. I mean, this is ridiculous. If there will always be situations where there is a problem, it has to be dealt with thoroughness, with transparency, with completeness, and all of that. But it's not important. Otherwise, the Reserve Bank of India has all the powers to make sure that if they have any suspicion about a board member or indeed the entire board, they have all
Shailesh Haribhakti, the same Reserve Bank of India that you're talking about, Shailesh Haribhakti, the same Reserve Bank of India that you're talking about also had a copy of Arvind Gupta's whistleblower report. You know, that is a hard fact. The RBI had it, the Prime Minister's office had it. Nothing was done about it until it came out once again in one of the leading newspapers of this country on the front page. Let's be honest about it, that once it started coming out so publicly is when we saw the fall of Chanda Kochhar, when all these corporate governance issues were raised. So yes, while, you know, we have autonomous regulators, let's also call a spade a spade. They had a copy of this whistleblower report.
I mean, it's not possible for me to go into what part of the investigation was done by RBI and what view they took and for what reason, because I'm not privy to all of that. But again, I think we need to make sure that the respect that we have for our regulators, the respect that we have for the system and the processes that have been laid down, which can create an orderly investigation, must be followed. And regulation must be respected and obeyed. And all processes should be done in a way that follows and leads us to a conclusion.
Mr. Roy, if I could come back to you. I once again want to get your views. ICICI says no impact on earnings from FY10 to FY18. Well and good. But, you know, can this only really be about Videocon? You know, I asked this very question earlier too, and I want to get Balbir Singh's views as well. In the press, we read about other links, whether it's allegedly with SR or with the sugar company. You know, you said that there will be a full trial, but does this mean that some of the biggest accounts, especially those accounts that have turned NP, are now going to be very scrutinized? You know, what is this going to mean? Will we once again see policy paralysis? Is it going to become a problem for credit offtake?
Well, I don't know if it will become a credit offtake issue or not, because, you know, few companies' links have been speculated upon, and people who have the ear to the ground knew about this quite some time ago. Videocon is one of them, which has come out to be true now, right? So you know, while we are all very good at dressing up exteriors and saying the right things, the fact of the matter is what happens behind the veil is not necessarily what you see in India, generally speaking, and this has happened in this bank as well. Now, a full trial, to my mind, as I mentioned earlier, is necessary to clean up the system. And only then we can take the actions, whatever is, either changing the board or the management, etc., all that. Yes, in the process, when such things do happen, there will be an impact on people to some extent, and to that end, people will be more careful before disbursing loans. I would think. Yes.
I got it.
So that's fine. I mean, that is what you need to be.
Balbir Singh, if I could now come to you. Balbir Singh, I want to talk law with you. Full trial, yes, I'm sure there will be deep scrutiny as well, especially of the loans that were given out, of which Chanda Kochhar was part of the credit committee. Having said that, legally, the fact that the board was initially backing Chanda Kochhar so solidly, was not even doing an independent inquiry, was only on public pressure, then we saw, unfold what we did see unfold. Legally speaking, what is it going to mean for the board members of ICICI Bank that had solidly backed Chanda Kochhar?
I answer this question, 2-3 things which I think are going to be very critical. One is whether this rot, what we are seeing, is only limited to one bank, or there is an apprehension that the other banks can also be into these kind of things. When I say this, primarily because if we see under the IBC today, most of the banks, they have some level of NPAs. Now, if somebody start looking into, with this kind of a scanner, whether the NPAs which were declared by the bank and these NPAs are against the lendings which were done over a period of time, whether those lendings were right or not, or the due diligence was done or not, and the committee, the manner in which approved the lendings at that stage, whether that can be looked into. But I would assume today that so far as ICICI position is concerned, that those NPA accounts would certainly be under scrutiny where things have gone wrong, which means that the IBC proceedings have started, and bank is not in position to fully recover their lendings, plus the interest portion. I would imagine that the extent of inquiry would go to certain such accounts. Now, to say that whether that's A account or B account, I am not the right person to comment on that. Now, answering your question, answering your question, I would imagine that the board, which was protecting Chanda Kochhar in any manner, is certainly at least liable for investigation. And I'm very sure, since many big names are already there in the FIR, if anybody is left out and there is any evidence to show that person other than those who are named in the FIR would certainly be investigated. And if they are found involved, I would imagine they'll also face the trial.
Okay. We're completely running out of time, so I'd like to thank all of you for joining us here for the first cut analysis. This is the big story clearly of the day. Justice Srikrishna report submitted to the ICICI Bank board. ICICI Bank has informed the stock exchanges. Has now taken the absence and resignation of Chanda Kochhar's termination, and that's because she's in the dock. Srikrishna has concluded that there have been violations in code of conduct. Big question is that did Chanda Kochhar act alone? What is this going to mean for ICICI Bank's existing board, the past board members and chairman that had so solidly backed Chanda Kochhar? Stay tuned to ET Now.